But let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals run game for a little bit, because the run game has been awful. One of the worst in the history of the National Football League, and I don't think that's hyperbolic either, to say the least. But Cincinnati, they haven't been able to pass block, obviously, but they haven't been able to run block either with that offensive line. And Chase Brown, you got national pundits out there acting like Chase Brown just stinks, but that's not the reality. It looks like he stinks, but the offensive line has been horrible for the Cincinnati Bengals to this point. Paul Dehner Jr. does a tremendous job covering the Cincinnati Bengals, writing for The Athletic. He has a piece out as it relates to their run game, and he has a couple of stats that he put out. The Bengals rank last in the NFL with 2.4 yards per carry. The Steelers, by the way, are second to last at 2.8, and the league average is 4.3. Obviously, that is not good. 2.4 yards per carry. It does not get any worse than that if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. On first and second downs, the Bengals rank last in yards per carry and success percentage without a single explosive run. That means 12-plus yards in 50 attempts. And that was always something that, you felt like you had with Chase Brown, right? Obviously, Joe Mixon, I think he had a great career here. I love what Joe Mixon was able to do on the football field. The tail end of his career here in Cincinnati, there was no threat of him getting a run for over 10 yards. That changed last year with Chase Brown. It felt like he had an ability to perhaps break one. And unfortunately, he has been yet to do that this year. Don't think that is his fault by any stretch of the imagination, as there are no run lanes for him along that offensive line. But no explosive runs this year in 50 attempts, obviously, is a serious issue. More from Dehner. In 2022, the Bengals shifted away from a zone attack into a downhill gap scheme and saw a significant uptick in efficiency. As you remember, back in 2022, they were 32nd, obviously last in the NFL through 4 weeks. If you remember that, a couple of years ago, year after the Super Bowl team, when they struggled at the beginning of that year and then obviously ended up still getting to the AFC Championship. And then by season's end, they were 8th. So that was obviously significant improvement. And then also in 2023, something that they were able to do a good job of is they added kind of a screen game. And that was what really allowed them to have some success with Jake Browning, as you saw some of that screen game worked in more. They tried to do that, by the way, a little bit against Minnesota. You saw it early, just trying to get it in Jamar's hands. That's a great defense. I think they'll have some success with that as the year progresses, but clearly no success with that against the Minnesota Vikings. So that shift in philosophy is interesting. From the zone attack to the downhill gap scheme, and I'm not going to sit here and try to explain that, and you don't want to hear a guy like me sit here and try to explain it, but the bottom line is this. There are some things that they can do schematically to change what they're doing right now that could potentially give them an opportunity, right? The coaches, and we talked about this on yesterday's show, are going to have to showcase their brilliance or show if they have brilliance, right? Because you're not going to just get a new offensive line. We talked about it this offseason. You had the offseason to rework it. You reworked it to the best of your ability, which I question whether or not it was the best of your ability, but regardless, you made some changes. This is your offensive line. Could you make a couple of small changes? Oh, yeah, we'll put in Jalen Rivers instead of Reisner. Okay, right? That's like one thing you can do. Oh, well, in a couple of weeks, if Lucas Patrick's healthy, we'll put him back in. Okay. Right, but you're not going to get these wholesale changes along the offensive line. The only hope here is scheme differences, or that you can block a little bit better. But I don't know. It's not like Ted Karras and those guys up front are trying to let get blown up. Right, I'm sure they're doing their best. Could they be more physical? It certainly seems like they could, just from the eye test looking at it, where they're just getting blasted on every play. You would think they could be a little bit more aggressive and physical and nasty up there. We'll see if they can do it, but it's going to be on the coaching staff to scheme some stuff up and find ways to put their players in better situations and do a better job at taking advantage of what the defense is doing. And they haven't done a good job of that at all. And then one more from Dehner here. In 2000, Corey Dillon carried 41 times for 82 yards in the first 3 games of the year, 3 blowout defeats where the Bengals scored 7 total points, and then he finished the season with over 1,400 yards rushing, 4.6 per carry, and had 278 yards on the ground in a Week 8 win against the Denver Broncos. So, those last 2 there from Dehner are a sense that things can get turned around is basically his point, right? It's been as bad as could possibly be here through 3 games for the Cincinnati Bengals. They've been in a spot before. Again, in 2022, if you remember, that start to the season was awful, right? They weren't doing a ton offensively. Obviously couldn't run the ball, but then they got it turned around. And before you knew it, they were kind of back into gear, winning all types of football games and back in the AFC Championship, play away from being in the Super Bowl. Now, with Corey Dillon, obviously, he had Willie Anderson. Willie Anderson should be a Hall of Famer. He's somehow not. That's a conversation for a different day. But there's no Willie Anderson out on the football field for Cincinnati, obviously. It's Orlando Brown Jr., and my goodness, just real quick one more time on Orlando Brown Jr. I came into this year feeling good about the bookend tackles and him and Mims. And obviously, what I was concerned about was the depth behind him. I was like, yeah, he'll be fine, but he's probably going to get banged up and miss a couple of games because, that seemingly has happened. Orlando Brown Jr. has not been fine. Orlando Brown Jr. has been awful. Orlando Brown Jr. is one of the reasons why you have looked so bad on offense, is one of the main reasons why. In fact, if I had to blame one guy, one player on offense, it would probably be him. He's supposed to be a solid left tackle. You got him, you paid him a lot of money, and he's played good football for you. He played great before he got hurt last year. But my goodness, he has been a liability, to say the least, for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, on the other side, obviously, you have Amarius Mims, who, out of all the offensive linemen, has clearly been the best. Has he been good? You could say probably not, right? But he's certainly been the best out of all the starters. But you have to find ways to shift and adapt in the run game and find a way to put your team in a better position. You don't have Joe Burrow, as we've talked about. And that's going to, we're just going to end up belaboring that point. That's just kind of where we're at here. You don't have Joe Burrow, right? You're going to have to run the football. You're going to have to figure some stuff out. You're going to have to coach really well and scheme really well to try to help Jake Browning. And I think there was this narrative by some people, and I love taking the optimistic side. I really do, and that's something that I'll continue to probably do. That's, if you're just going to be a fan and you're just going to be down in the dumps all the time, pessimistic, say, oh yeah, we suck, we're never going to have a chance, it's the same old. Well, that's just not a way to live life, right? What's the point of being a fan when you're sitting there watching sports? For the most part, most people have, real jobs that are serious jobs that are very, very stressful, what have you. And when you sit down and you watch sports, it's a distraction. If you're using that distraction just to be negative, what are you doing? That's kind of my mindset. You might as well be positive about it. And we were gonna be positive about Jake Browning, coming in. Obviously it was sad, depressing, frustrating, whatever with Joe Burrow, but you have to move on, unfortunately. They're not going to cancel the season. They're still going to line up and play, and if you're still a fan, you're still going to tap in. You're not going to be as excited as you were. You're not going to be as optimistic as you were, but you're still probably going to tap in if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan. But one thing people were struggling with was that, we got Jake Browning. We still got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson on defense. We still got some guys, and Jake Browning he's a top of the line backup. He's one of the best. Folks, we went from the best quarterback in the National Football League. You don't agree with me? Fine. We went from a top 3 quarterback in the National Football League. If you don't think he's the best, you have to admit he's at least top 3. That's just the cold, hard facts. It's the reality of the situation. From a top 3 quarterback to a backup, not to a low-end starter, not to a middle-of-the-road starter, to a backup quarterback. There was no way that it was going to look even remotely similar to when Joe Burrow's out there, even if Jake Browning was balling, and hopefully he gets back to what he was doing in 2023, gives you an opportunity to win some games. You went from Joe Burrow to a backup, and I'm not trying to sit here and disrespect Jake Browning. A solid backup in the National Football League. Makes a lot of money. He's going to continue to be a backup in the National Football League. He's not a starter. It's not like, we went from Joe Burrow to a low-end starter. No, we went from Joe Burrow to a backup. That's a problem. You have to be able to run the football with a backup. You got to be able to outcoach the other team or at least hang in there in a chess match against another opponent. If you go out there with a backup quarterback and have no run game and get completely outcoached and lack effort and physicality and attention to detail and turn the ball over 5 times, that's what you're going to get. So a lot needs to be cleaned up for Cincinnati. They're not going to be in a spot as a team where they can go out there and maybe take a couple of plays off in the first quarter, have a couple of mental mistakes, maybe lose the turnover battle, and here comes Joe Burrow in the fourth quarter, and he'll put together 2 incredible drives, and you'll edge out a victory. It's not going to happen. He's not here to do that, unfortunately. You're going to have to be more buttoned up as a team. You're going to have to coach better. You're going to have to be more prepared, more disciplined, all right? More unselfish as a team. Guys are going to have to be sacrificing, putting their bodies on the line, competing each and every play, not taking plays off. All those things have to be done now that you don't have Joe Burrow as your quarterback for the foreseeable future. We'll see if this team is capable of making those adjustments. We'll see if this coaching staff is capable of making those adjustments as well.